Mic check, 1, 2. Mic check, Wyoming PBS. 1, 2, 3.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks again for joining us. This afternoon, I have Superintendent of Public Instruction with us today, and State Health Officer Alexia Harrist is here to answer some questions. Our format will be a little bit different today with schools opening in some parts of the state next week. I want to make sure I have an opportunity for the superintendent to take a moment. She actually has she's made some room in her schedule to be here today. And after she speaks, she'll take some questions. And Dr. Harris will be here, as I mentioned. This morning, I did want to say that we extended our current health orders for 2 more weeks with one change. After seeing outdoor events, including rodeos, occur without corresponding spikes in case numbers, it seemed only appropriate that we expand the number of people permitted to gather for outdoor events. Beginning Saturday, outdoor events for up to 1,000 people will be permitted as long as attendees maintain their social distance, and that will allow schools to host sporting events and other outdoor activities with spectators this fall. It's important to remember that we really would like to keep that at 50% of a venue's capacity, but again, we've expanded the outdoor venue space, and Dr. Harris can talk about that a little bit in a moment. Also, we are in the process of working to develop a COVID-19 testing option for teachers. This is surveillance testing, similar to what we've done with our long-term care facilities, where we test a percentage of the teachers at regular intervals. So I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One, obviously we want to be able to monitor what's going on with the infection rate, and then more appropriately, we also want to make sure that teachers know they have access to and feel comfortable coming back to school. We all are invested in making sure our schools come up and run well, and I just really want to compliment the superintendent and her shop for the great work they've done in bringing this to fruition. It will be a voluntary program, allowing districts to opt in if they choose to. There are some details that we're still working on this testing program, but I hope to have an announcement soon. But because Superintendent, you're here, and it's thrilled to have you here with us, I want to make sure you have the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Governor, so much, and thank you for your continued dedication to education and so many other aspects of our lives in Wyoming and working to keep us all safe and healthy. So, good afternoon. On July 1st, my office, in conjunction with the Department of Health, released the Smart Start guidance for Wyoming schools. The guidance was developed by health, care, education, and technology experts from across the state. And more than anything, this guidance has served as a critical conversation guide for school districts and communities as they finalize their plans for going back to school this fall and staying in school throughout this school year. Every school district has planned for at least 3 tiers of operation, which are oriented around potential state and local health orders. Most school districts, as of today, are starting in Tier 1, although there are some exceptions that are starting in Tier 3. And this means Tier 1 is open for in-person instruction with modifications aligned to state and county health orders. Our goal, of course, is to open and remain in Tier 1 for as much of the school year as possible. Each district has submitted a Smart Start plan to the Department of Education for review. I am the last person on the review team to give final approval to those plans, and I'm happy to report that as of today, we have over half of the districts approved, and I anticipate having all 48 school districts approved by the end of this week. This is important for Wyoming to know because it puts your school district and your community in a position to best maneuver through the many challenges that we will undoubtedly face this year. All of the school districts, all of the building principals, teachers, families have put enormous work into ensuring the safety of our students and teachers and community members. And I'm very, very pleased to see this incredible work take place across our school districts throughout the state. with most school districts starting in Tier 1, and again, that's regular operations with some modifications. I want to just reiterate that in-person instruction looks different than it did before we went to remote education last spring. Current and new state health orders, as well as local orders, at a minimum, require that students are social distancing at a distance of 6 feet or more, and when that can't be maintained, students, staff, and other visitors are wearing face coverings. As I review plans, I'll note that most districts are working diligently to reconfigure their school space and make sure that students can social distance for as much of the day and for as many activities as possible. So speaking of activities, for many high school students and high school students, sports began this week, and I just want to thank the Wyoming High School Activities Association and Director Ron Laird for all of the work that they have done to ensure the safety of students, coaches, and with new health orders, we hope and anticipate some spectators as well. I want to close today, I want to close my remarks today by just reiterating a quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower, and it goes something like this: "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." And this is so applicable right now to our situation with school. We're in a good place, but certainly there will be course corrections, there will be challenges, and there will be innovations and great ideas that come forth. Please, I ask everyone in Wyoming to be a partner with your school district, to keep the line of communication open, and to help navigate this environment so that we are first and foremost safe and healthy, and that we are also ensuring the best opportunity for student growth emotionally, academically, physically, etc. We are Team 307, and we need to persevere through this pandemic to ensure that the best education possible is delivered to all students across the state. They are our future, and they deserve nothing but our very best. So we received a question from Greg Johnson from the Gillette News Record. I'd like to read that now. To what extent do you expect to see parents and students opting for virtual education opportunities, either because of pre-existing medical conditions or simply out of an abundance of caution against infection? And how does the state plan to assess those students to determine adequate academic progress is being realized? We do not have a student count for virtual education yet. We will as the school year begins and continues. Anecdotally, a number of school districts have utilized the flexibility that we've offered with virtual education and are offering virtual education or a hybrid education as an option within the public school system. We also have virtual schools that have existed long before the pandemic, and so this is not new to us. Virtual education for Wyoming students is not new business. We know how to assess them, and it looks much the same as assessing students who are in brick and mortar. Regardless of how students are assessed or where they are assessed this year, we will make sure that it is safe. Just one more note about assessments, and that is that statewide it's too early to make any final determinations about the summative assessment that we call YTOP in Wyoming. As you'll recall, Wyoming led the pack when we adopted YTOP in analyzing burdensome tests, and I think COVID-19 presents a really great opportunity for us to re-examine our summative assessments. I also believe that the most important assessments for the beginning of this school year are those that take place in the classroom. It is vital that our teachers begin assessing formally and informally on day one to look at learning gaps and challenges as well as growth that students have made, and that we continue throughout the year to provide interventions that are necessary for all students. It's incumbent on all of us as citizens, as parents, and as supporters of education, again, to recognize that this is an essential part of every classroom, and that we can support kids by keeping the line of communication open and by working together. Again, we're Team 307, and at this time, I know that there is a question that is education and health related, and so I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Harrist.
Thank you, Superintendent. We had a question come in from the Sheridan Press that was, do you expect, even with precautions and smart start plans in place, to see an uptick in COVID cases across the state as schools reopen? So I did say last week that I do expect that there will be some cases among students and school staff over time. But I wouldn't say that I expect an overall increase that is directly caused by or connected to schools. The measures that we have put into place are meant to prevent that from happening. We have had very few cases or outbreaks connected to daycares or other summer activities such as baseball or camps this year, which shows that these measures can be effective. Within the schools, there are very good plans in place to help keep students and staff safe. There are also plans in place to respond to cases that may occur to limit the spread or the size of the outbreaks. That being said, it certainly is a possibility and a concern, and we will be monitoring the situation closely. It's also important to remember that students and teachers can be exposed to the virus outside of the schools. So we can all do our part to help make schools safe and help keep them open by continuing to take the simple steps we've been asking people to take all along to prevent spread within the community: physical distancing, wearing face masks, and staying home when you're sick. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Governor Gordon.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you, Superintendent. I wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for questions to be asked of the superintendent if there were some. Tom has one.
Hi, Superintendent. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon. So I wanted to circle back to the COVID-19 testing plan that the governor had mentioned, just expanding on that a little bit. But you also mentioned that it's a voluntary program. And so I was wondering, I guess, first, have you heard any opposition or pushback from any school districts? And are you expecting that eventually all districts will be on board with the program?
Thank you for that question. I may have others weigh in as well, but this is a brand new announcement for all of us, and so it will be rolling out soon with some more details. But we, as we have with other things in COVID-19, release the information so that school districts can begin planning for scenarios. In terms of the opt-in, opt-out, we don't have details, and those will be forthcoming. So I wish we had more information, and we don't at this time. But we are very anxious to get details and get that information out to districts.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I will just add that, from obviously schools are reopening across the country, and, so we're all learning as we go. There is not a recommendation from the CDC to do surveillance testing in schools. However, it's certainly something that we think could be beneficial and would like to offer since we do have the ability to do so. But given that it's not, a recommendation or requirement from the CDC, felt that, an opt-in program would be appropriate, versus something universal.
Do we have any questions on the phone? Okay, turning it back over to Governor Gordon. Governor, thank you again.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thanks very much. And just a little clarification on the opt-in and process. We haven't heard any specific pushback at this point, Tom, just being clear about that. But I think managing this for the best and most flexible approach to the school going forward. Tests are changing. There are lots of different categories of way we can test people, and we really want to be able to fit the circumstances to what's on the ground and work with local school districts to make sure that happens. That's really the best case, as well as anybody, that things are different here than they might be in Bighorn County or Crook County or something like that. So we're really trying to provide tools that school districts can use, and we want to make sure that not only our teachers feel safe, but their parents feel safe, their kids, and the kids themselves feel safe being in school. That we've heard a lot about over the last couple of weeks. So, but thanks, and thanks again, Superintendent. Just a couple more things about COVID-19. We reached a 3,000 case mark this week in total cases. As of today, there are 2,600 lab-confirmed cases with an additional 489 probable cases. There are currently 2,164 recoveries among our lab-confirmed cases, leaving us 407 active lab-confirmed cases. That's good news. I mean, it's not good news that we have 407, but it's good news that we are a little bit less than what we were last week. Today, we've had 16 new lab-confirmed cases reported. Yesterday, sadly, while I was up in Casper opening the Central Wyoming Crisis Center suicide 24-hour call line, I heard of an additional death in Uinta, and our hearts certainly go out to friends and family in Uinta and elsewhere in Wyoming that are feeling and grieving for the loss of that wonderful person. That leaves our statewide death count at 29. I'll point out that that is well within the range that was somewhere predicted back when we started modeling back in April. So I think it shows that models are informative, but we necessarily don't follow exactly along what the model says. But when we look at models, we can kind of anticipate what we might see. We continue to monitor Wyoming's positive case rate, and that is the percentage of tests that come back positive for COVID-19 over the past 14 days. That rate is currently 2.8%, and that, too, is encouraging. It's down from somewhere over 3 not too many days ago. Our statewide COVID-19 dashboard remains unchanged. The categories of new cases and new hospitalizations continue to be listed as concerning. We have 15 hospitalizations, and if you're looking at the chart, you'll see that our hospitalization rate over the last several weeks has kind of trended back up. That is a bit of concern, but I want to say that we feel that we may be on kind of the right track. It has declined slightly since August 1st. Our statewide numbers have remained stable and show small signs of improvement. The number of new cases has continued to slowly decline, and over the past 2 weeks, Wyoming has averaged 30 lab-confirmed cases of COVID-19 per day. We have 412 new cases confirmed since July 29th. What I think this says is that people in Wyoming are taking it seriously. They're being respectful of their neighbors and others, and they're taking the precautions that we would hope that they would take for the most part. And I think it is such a critical thing. Right now we have state fair going on. It's been exciting to see as our state fairs have proceeded and the auctions that kids had did particularly well. It's exciting to see us sort of get back into a pace. Let's not lose that pace. Let's make sure that we enter this school season. Obviously a little bit of concern about what it's going to look like, but I think if we all take our part and do our part, we will have a very successful fall. By comparison, from July 12th to 26th, we averaged 37 cases of COVID per day and had 523 lab-confirmed cases. Just a word on testing. Over the last few weeks, we've seen the volumes decrease a little bit at the state health lab. They are anxious to do testing. They love to test. That's what they do particularly well. I'm very proud, Dr. Harrist, of your shop as well for the work that they've done. But it's critical. If you feel symptomatic, please make sure you go and get that test. It's critical from a number of reasons. It's critical that we know what's going on. It's critical for an individual. We would hate to see challenges that would slip over into long-term care facilities or somebody's grandparents, or even an individual who's at risk. We want businesses to be supportive of our workers getting tested if they're feeling sick. We're identifying cases as key to preventing large outbreaks, and that, along with mask usage, is going to help us slow the spread of this virus. And that's particularly critical. As about a week ago, for the second time since 1882, we were down to 0 rigs working in the state. That's a zip. We now have one that's up and running. We're hopeful that that business will start to come back a little bit. We're doing everything we can to make it come along rapidly, but we need to have a workforce that's healthy and ready to work. And of course, that goes for our vital industries like coal mining and trona mining, manufacturing, and the other things that our workforce is so key at doing. Testing and wearing a mask when you can't social distance is still going to help keep our schools and businesses open. I really, we've spent a lot of time talking about that over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's just critical. If you want our economy to stay open, wear a mask when you can't social distance. Your friends and neighbors and the businesses and your town's economy and our state's economy will all appreciate that. But there are a few individuals who are struggling to keep in their homes, and that's been much in the news of late. Wyoming, back in June, launched the Wyoming Emergency Housing Assistance Program to assist residents who were unable to pay housing costs. And at this time, I want to ask Scott Hoversland from the Wyoming Community Development Authority to come up and speak about changes that they've made in this program to make it more accessible, easier to use, and easier to address problems. So Scott, please, thanks.
Thank you, Governor, and I appreciate that. As the Governor said this morning, he approved changes to the Wyoming Emergency Housing Assistance Program that started on June 4th. As of this morning, WCDA has received 653 applications for housing assistance. 116 of those were for continued housing assistance, or that was repeat another month after month requests for additional months' payments. There were, however, 136 applications which have been denied. Looking back at these, two of the main reasons that there were denials is we had a requirement for a 30% copay on if you have current income coming into your household, you had to pay 30% of your current gross income towards your housing payment. And that was resulting in a lot of applicants being denied. The other reason was that people were applying for mortgage assistance, and they actually had federally backed mortgages, so they had a forbearance option that they could get and not have to make payments on. So that was already covered by additional CARES Act requirements. 306 applications have been completed and approved for payment, and approximately $369,000 in payments have been made under that program, with an additional $53,500 approved since the last payments went out on last Thursday, for a total to date of $422,500 in payments. We were approved for $15 million in funding that was appropriated to us through the legislature. And as you can see, a little over 2 months into it, that's a small amount of that money has went out. And we looked at some of the changes that could be made, and those items are the approval for increased maximum monthly payment from $2,000 to $3,000. A reduced copay amount from 30% of your current gross income down to just 10% of your current gross income. And that copay requirement is something that was required in the legislation by the special session. We also removed the restriction on liquid assets of $10,000. So if an applicant had $10,000 or the household had $10,000 of liquid assets, it had to fall below that mark before they were eligible for payment. So that requirement has been removed. And the final was the change in the definition of a household. And a household applies to only the applicant, spouse, and domestic partner. Previously, it had included roommates and children over the age of 18. So these changes are being updated on our website and on the application as we speak, and applications going forward will be under the new rules. So if you have applied before, please go back on, reapply. You may be eligible under the new rules for the program. And we have the slide that's up. It shows our website, wyomingcda.com, with an email address that you can write, or the phone number that you can call for the WEHAP Helps Hotline, 307-253-1089. Again, thank you, Governor, and thank you for everyone for the ability to help those in need.
And Scott, you'll be here to answer a couple of questions at the end here, I presume. Good. Yeah, and let me just reiterate how important this program is. From the start, we didn't want to see people getting evicted or losing their mortgages. We didn't want to see people going broke because they weren't getting paid. That's what this program was meant to do, and it is being adjusted because the demand is really there, but the program wasn't as accessible as we had hoped it would be. And so I want to really commend you and your board for the work you've done in doing that, and I know you stand ready to do more. I did, just to sort of finish off a little bit, I wanted to talk about the Wyoming Sense that's on our website. It kind of indicates where we are with this CARES Act funding. There's a difference between what you're seeing there, which is the allocation model, and the pacing of it. As you can see, we're not yet to the September deadline for the third bunch of funding, tranche as they call it, to be released, but we're getting very close. Business Council, just wanted to bring that up to speed. On Monday, I transferred an additional $10 million to these programs to meet the high demand for these funds. As of this morning, we have received more than $200 million in requests for the Relief Fund and the Mitigation Fund from nearly 2,500 applicants, and we have approximately released $70 million of those funds. We have, in the allocation of these funds, fully met the $325 million that we had anticipated from the legislature, and there's an additional nearly $100 million to go to agriculture-related programs that, as we see market conditions ripen this fall, and as we see the opportunities for standing up beef processing and some of the other things that have been asked for by the agricultural community. The review process does take some time. We want to verify the funds are being distributed appropriately. And as I mentioned the other day when we were in the State Loan Investment Board, we want to make sure that we do not burden the taxpayers of next year or year after with an unexpected expense if these things are inappropriately used. These funds, I am sure, when you look at what Wyoming has done compared to our peers, Wyoming has really benefited from the CARES Act uniquely better than many of our peers, and we want to make sure that we can not only defend them, but that they are being expended appropriately and doing the best good. The Business Council will be meeting Friday to provide initial approval of the broadband expansion plans that have been submitted by providers. As I've mentioned previously, this is around $100 million investment in broadband infrastructure for underserved and unserved parts of Wyoming. That's a lot of our rural areas, so it's exciting to see that program underway. And I really want to thank the community of broadband providers for not only being part of the process, but also being incredibly helpful and courageous and bold in the way that they've looked at how to provide these services. We've also, this last State Loan and Investment Board meeting, approved around a little bit more than $58 million going to local government subdivisions, so that's not only towns and counties, it's other rural districts as well. And we set up the preliminary comments on an allocation plan that will reduce a lot of the bureaucracy that comes at the beginning of the program and really enable and free up communities to be able to get after the important work of getting prepared for the impact that COVID-19 has had and will have going forward. I couldn't stop without at least talking a little bit about how we continue to work to address our budget challenges and to make sure that, of course, that our CARES funds are used effectively. With Wyoming citizens continuing to make good choices, our economy can continue to get stronger and our kids can get back into school. And it's been actually exciting to hear. I know some businesses have taken a big hit on the chin, but in talking anecdotally to people in Park County and Teton County and Crook County, Sheridan County, and down here in Laramie, we got off to a bit of a slow start, as could be expected with COVID-19, but our rates of tourism have really expanded. I am hearing a lot of complaints. It's hard for us to get to a place where we don't see 1,000 Colorado cars or Utah cars or Massachusetts cars or Illinois cars or California cars or you name it. But it is good that they're coming. It is good that they're spending their dollars here in Wyoming, because what that has meant is that we've had a positive uptick to our tourism industry, and that is one of our principal legs. I did want to just take a moment. 5 days from now, everybody will have a chance to go exercise their right to vote. This is one of the privileges that I've enjoyed ever since I had the opportunity to vote. And it is a responsibility we as citizens have. Could never be more important than this year. This is probably one of the most important elections that we've ever had. And it's especially important for Wyoming. If you look at our future and the ability for our businesses to thrive, I think you know the right decisions to make. I can now be absolutely open for any questions that come. And as I say, Scott's still here. We do have a representative from the board, or from the Department of Education to take some questions if there are some of those, and of course Dr. Harris is here as well. So with that, I would be happy to open questions. Actually,
Governor Gordon, this is Mark Bentley with 307 Net Radio.
Yes.
In Buffalo.
Yes, Mark. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you. It's good to be here. There are, in the health orders, proscriptions against some activities, numbers of people in spaces, the requirement that people in restaurants, workers in restaurants, wear face coverings, etc. What about the enforcement of those orders? How is that determined? Who does the enforcement, and what are the penalties?
Well, the penalties are set in statute, and they are a fine. There is the possibility for being locked up, I guess, for a period of time. The enforcement is done by local authorities. But Mark, let me say that my hope is that, and I don't think anybody really wants to try to, these are limitations on personal freedoms. We have from the beginning said that it is absolutely critical that people exercise responsible behavior. I went off on a tirade last time because it is not just me that I should be caring about. It is the people around me. And in this particular virus's case, where we have seen one person that has shown up and infected a lot of other people, it couldn't be more important than now to take that responsibility for oneself and one's community as our Constitution described in the beginning and as our founding fathers thought was absolutely proper. If Dr. Harris wants to address any of this, I'm happy. And I think I've covered it, Mark. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I do have a question here from Greg Johnson of the News Record, who's asking about the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. Senator John Barrasso's the chairman of that committee, and he is going to hold field hearing next week at the Integrated Test Center, that marvelous piece of technology that was established up around Gillette, that has provided really some great insights into what we can do with carbon, really the first of its kind, a remarkable thing. They will be there to see 2 Carbon X Prize finalists demonstrating their carbon capture and reuse technologies. And so, Greg, to your question, which is how important is it to have the committee there on the ground, couldn't be more important. We are, as a country, as a world, as a globe, dealing with the effects of carbon in the atmosphere. People are trying to talk about, ways to limit it by limiting fossil fuels and putting up renewables. What we're saying here in Wyoming is the way forward is an all energy front. We need to be able to use the energy sources as they are important. When people think about Wyoming, they think about the vistas and wildlife population. Covering it up with renewables may be a problem for that. And more importantly, and this is the critical thing that we're doing at the ITC, it is absolutely essential that we take carbon out of the atmosphere, that we find a use, a commercial use for the carbon that we extract. We're wasting that, and we're not addressing climate change. So the point of what we're doing at the ITC, the ability to show that technology to use fossil fuels in a proper way is absolutely essential to the survival of humankind, that fossil fuels play a critical role in our ability as an economy and as a nation to continue our upward progress. That's what's happening there, and that's what's so exciting to see the Senate members coming to see that on the ground in action. So I'm thrilled and proud of the fact that Wyoming is taking such a leadership role, and I'm also thrilled that Gillette is right smack in the middle of all that. Next question.
Hey, Governor, Jim O'Reilly, Bigfoot 99 Radio. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Jim. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'd like to get your reaction to what looks like the certain loss of Cowboy football this fall. Are you disappointed, perhaps relieved there won't be crowds and tailgating? Have you talked to UW President Ed Seidel about the impacts on revenues to the university? And would you be open to the Cowboys playing games outside of the Mountain West Conference? As the head coach of University of Nebraska, Scott Frost, has suggested that if the Big Ten won't let Nebraska play, they'd be open to games outside of their conference. Maybe it seems trivial in the overall pursuit, but maybe Wyoming games are important to the Cowboy state.
Jim, absolutely on point. Just this morning, Board of Trustees, there was a long discussion about that, and the incredible disappointment that all of us feel at the loss of this part of the season. I guess they're still talking about a spring season, but the loss of revenue, and it isn't just football, although I'll come back to that. It's all the sports, things like golf and women's soccer and volleyball and men's soccer. These are all sort of delayed this year, and I think for the fans, for the athletes, absolutely devastating. One of the things that I was promising to President Seidel and looking at with Tom Berman was, are there ways that we can help those athletes with their scholarships to make sure they are there. They came back early, obviously anticipating a season, and I think everyone is disappointed that we're not doing that. To your point about Coach Frost's comments, that was one of the things that I laid off to Tom Berman. I said, what about a friendly between Nebraska and Wyoming? Honestly, I'm going to call Pete Ricketts and say, Pete, do you think we can do this together? I think there are some concerns about that, but just from the two conferences, I don't know what the contractual obligations are, but hey, I'm ready to play.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Next question.
Oh, hey, Governor Gordon. This is Nick Reynolds from the Casper Star. How you doing?
I'm well, Nick. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. Thanks for asking. So I know we put out a release on this yesterday regarding the state of the land deal, and I know that Occidental actually announced that they're moving forward with a different bidder. While they haven't revealed the details of who that was, I was just wondering if anyone within the state had any understanding of what types of parties were interested. Are we talking about private companies or other governments, other state or other countries? What were we looking at there?
Nick, I wish I had a way to look into that. They're holding their cards very close to the vest. We do know that we were in consideration. We don't know if we've been excused from that consideration yet. But we are starting to say, look, I mean, it's getting close to the end of the year. We got to get ready for some other things. And so, we haven't had any communications. I can't really comment anything about the other contenders. All I can say is that yesterday they made that announcement, and I have been in contact, hoping to arrange a call here in the next few days. Thanks. Next question.
And you've been listening.
I'm sorry? I think we lost you. I just had a bit. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Joe's taking our calls here, and he was indicating that call had been dropped. Well, with that, there is a question. Please.
Governor, it's Jim O'Reilly again. There are always so many questions and so little time. Thank you for entertaining one more question from me at Bigfoot 99. And it's a question about the hospitalization, since that's up on the dashboard. What has been driving the increase in hospitalizations, although they have trended down? Is it the severity of the cases? Is it the age of the patients? Is it the prison in Rollins? Has there been any analysis of what drove that spike in hospitalizations and now the trend back down, or was it perhaps the length of the stays of some of the hospitalizations that kept that above average? Thank you.
Thank you. This is Alexia Harrist, and I would really say it's pretty much a combination of all the factors that you named. As we started to see that, sort of the increase in cases in the beginning of July, middle of July, we did expect that we would see an increase in hospitalizations relatively delayed to that, and that is because we know that many individuals will develop more severe illness later in their course of illness, so later in the first week or even into their second week of illness require hospitalization. And so it wasn't unexpected that the increase in numbers of cases would be followed by an increase in hospitalizations, and we did see that. We know from data around the country that individuals, as we've talked about all along, can be at risk for more severe illness due to numerous factors, age, underlying medical conditions such as lung disease, heart disease, immunocompromising conditions, and those certainly play a role in the hospitalizations in Wyoming as well, which is why we've also talked all along about protecting the more vulnerable in our community. So, of course, we do hope, as we've seen the trend in the last 10 days or so, that the numbers of cases are coming down. We do hope that hospitalizations will follow, and of course, hospitalizations is one of our most important indicators, as one of our primary goals is making sure hospitals have enough beds and providers to care for anyone who needs it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. First Lady and I are about to get in a car to drive to the Ag Hall of Fame supper up in Douglas in the park there. So if there, I'll take one more question. But thank you very much for tuning in. If there aren't any questions, and just thanks, people of Wyoming, for staying the course on this. We are demonstrating the right behaviors, and I just, when I hear from our peers, from Brad Little, from Christy Nome, from Doug Burgum, from even Jared Polis in Colorado, that we're doing the right thing, I just got to thank you. So if there is one more question, I'll take it. And if there are none, thank you, and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for tuning in.